For thousands of years, the pyramids of Egypt have stood with an almost supernatural presence, giant geometric mountains rising out of the desert, defying wind, time, erosion, and even explanation. They were already ancient when the Roman Empire rose and fell. They were already mysterious when medieval travelers first gazed at them in awe. And even today, in an age of satellites and quantum physics, the question remains one of humanity's greatest obsessions. How were these impossible structures actually built? Most people grow up hearing the simple story. Thousands of slaves dragging stones under the whips of kings, stacking blocks in perfect precision because they were forced to. A straightforward tale, a clean narrative, a version of history taught in schools for decades. But the real story is far more complex, far more fascinating, and far more human. What you learned in school, in most cases, wasn't wrong because teachers lied. It was wrong because archaeologists didn't yet know the truth. To understand how the pyramids were actually built, we must first step into a world radically different from our own. A world without steel, without machinery, without wheels strong enough to carry massive stone blocks across uneven terrain. A world where the most powerful tool wasn't bronze or stone, but knowledge. The Great Pyramid of Giza, Khufu's pyramid, is made of more than 2.3 million stone blocks, each weighing anywhere from 2 to 15 tons. Some of the largest granite beams used inside weigh over 70 tons, transported from quarries hundreds of kilometers away. Its base covers 13 acres. Its sides align almost perfectly with the cardinal directions, with an error so small that even modern engineers pause to admire it. Everything about it suggests planning, precision, and purpose, but nothing about it suggests simplicity. So how did an ancient civilization with limited technology construct something so mathematically perfect and physically massive? The answer begins long before a single stone was placed or even carved. It begins with the Nile. Each year, the river flooded its banks, depositing nutrient-rich silt across the land and forcing agricultural work to pause. Far from being helpless during this season, the Egyptians used it as a national workforce program. When farms could not operate, workers were recruited, not slaves, but mostly paid laborers, craftsmen, farmers, and skilled builders to take part in what was considered a sacred duty, constructing monuments for the gods and the afterlife of the pharaoh, who was believed to be the bridge between the earthly world and the divine. Recent archaeological discoveries at Giza have revealed worker villages, bakeries, breweries, medical facilities, and even administrative offices. Bones show evidence of well-fed bodies, healed injuries, and organized labor teams. This was no enslaved workforce. It was a professional community, highly structured, surprisingly well-treated, and deeply proud of its contribution. The graffiti left behind by construction crews bears team names like the Friends of Khufu, the Drunkards of Menkaure, or the Vigorous Crew. These inscriptions reflect camaraderie, not coercion. But good organization alone does not explain engineering on this scale. To build the pyramids, the Egyptians needed a comprehensive blueprint, one based on geometry long before Greek geometry became famous. They used what scholars now call the sekhed, a unit describing the ratio of horizontal run to vertical rise, essentially an early version of slope measurement. With the sekhed, Egyptian architects achieved slopes so consistent across massive distances that even modern laser tools would struggle to replicate them with greater accuracy. The base of the Great Pyramid was leveled using a simple yet genius method, flooding the area with water, letting it settle into natural equilibrium, marking the high points and removing the excess material. They created what was essentially the largest, most precise water level ever constructed in the ancient world. The result? A base whose corners differ in elevation by less than 2 centimeters. And then there's the alignment. The Great Pyramid is oriented within 3/60ths of a degree to true north. For comparison, the best modern compasses can't achieve that precision. How did the Egyptians do it? They observed the stars. Specifically, they tracked the circumpolar stars, stars that never set, and used their slow rotation to establish a near-perfect north-south axis. By marking the midpoint of their nightly rotation, they found true north with astonishing accuracy. Now the question becomes, once they had the plan and the workforce, how did they move the stones? For decades, the belief was that stones were dragged across sand using wooden sledges, with workers pouring water to reduce friction. This is partly true. Egyptian tomb paintings show workers pulling sledges while a single man stands at the front, pouring liquid beneath the runners. Experimental archaeology has confirmed that wet sand dramatically reduces resistance, but that is only one piece of the puzzle. The bigger mystery is the transportation of the truly massive blocks, especially the granite beams used in the king's chamber of the Great Pyramid. These were quarried in Aswan, over 800 kilometers away. How were they moved? The answer lies in the Nile's natural cycle and in ingenious engineering. During the annual flood, water levels rose, allowing heavy barges to carry multi-ton stones downstream. The Egyptians built harbors, canals, and docks specifically for construction projects, including a newly discovered port at Giza itself. The stones didn't need to cross miles of desert. They simply floated to within walking distance of the pyramid site. Once the stones arrived, teams of specialists took over: stonecutters, polishers, rope workers, sledge pullers, ramp builders, surveyors, and supervisors. The construction site functioned more like a modern industrial complex than a simple building project. This brings us to the famous debate. What kind of ramp was used? Straight ramps would have required an absurd amount of material, more material, in fact, than the pyramid itself. Spiral ramps around the outside seem logical, but they lack archaeological evidence and would have obscured the angles the builders needed to measure. The most compelling theory today suggests that the Egyptians used a combination of short external ramps and an internal ramp system built within the pyramid structure. French architect Jean-Pierre Houdin proposed that a corkscrew-shaped internal ramp allowed stones to be pulled up gradually as the structure rose, explaining both the engineering and the lack of external ramp remains. Is this proven? Not definitively, but scanning with microgravity detectors has revealed internal voids shaped exactly like what Houdin predicted. The evidence grows stronger each year. Now consider the precision of the pyramid's interior. Ascending and descending passages cut with almost laser-straight accuracy, chambers placed at mathematically significant locations, joints between stones so close that a sheet of paper cannot fit between them. This level of craftsmanship required obsessive attention to detail. Copper chisels were sharpened constantly. Dolerite pounding stones, extremely hard volcanic rock, were used to shape granite with surprising efficiency. For limestone blocks, copper tools were sufficient. Skilled workers shaped each block to fit its intended position with astonishing geometric awareness. But still, the question remains: why build something so enormous and so precise? Part of the answer lies in religious belief. The pyramid represented the primordial mound of creation, the place from which the world emerged. Its shape mirrored the rays of the sun god Ra, and its orientation connected the pharaoh's soul to the north, the region of the immortal stars. It was not a tomb in the modern sense. It was a cosmic machine designed to ensure eternal life. Yet beyond religion, the pyramid was also a demonstration of national power and unity. It was a monumental statement. Egypt was organized, disciplined, technologically advanced, and guided by a ruler who could marshal the labor and intelligence of thousands. Construction projects united the country, gave workers purpose during off-seasons, and solidified the pharaoh's legitimacy. As we examine the evidence, a different image begins to emerge, one far removed from the conquest and oppression once assumed. The pyramids were built not by slaves forced to labor under tyranny, but by a proud workforce whose identity, spirituality, and culture were interwoven with the project. They were well-fed, medically treated, organized into teams, and immortalized by the graffiti they left behind. They weren't nameless. They weren't invisible. They were part of something far greater than themselves. But what about those who claim that the pyramids were too perfect, too massive, too mathematically aligned to have been built by humans of the ancient world? What about theories involving aliens, lost super-civilizations, or forgotten technologies? These ideas are popular not because they are supported by evidence, but because the truth, human ingenuity, is almost too impressive to believe. It's easier to imagine extraterrestrial help than to accept that ancient engineers could achieve what seems impossible. Yet every piece of the puzzle uncovered by modern archaeology points relentlessly toward the same conclusion. The Egyptians could do it, and they did do it, using methods that combined deep observation of nature, careful planning, and tireless human effort. There is no gap in their abilities that requires an alien explanation. There is no missing technology that cannot be accounted for through the tools they possessed. What we see in the pyramids is the accumulation of centuries of knowledge, refined and perfected. One of the most remarkable aspects of pyramid construction is the speed at which it was completed. The Great Pyramid is believed to have taken around 20 years to build. At first glance, this seems impossible. 2 million blocks in 2 decades means placing a block every few minutes. But remember, not all stones were massive. Many were smaller, standard-sized limestone blocks. Hundreds of teams worked simultaneously on multiple levels, and much of the stone was quarried just hundreds of meters away. When viewed through the lens of large-scale coordinated labor, the timeline is not only possible, it is expected. Inside the pyramid, the engineering becomes even more astonishing. The Grand Gallery, an enormous sloping corridor lined with core-built stone layers, defies simple explanation. It appears not only to serve structural purposes, but also functional ones during construction, possibly housing counterweights or lifting mechanisms used to position heavy granite blocks. The relieving chambers above the king's chamber, stacked with massive granite beams, are arranged to distribute weight and prevent collapse. These chambers are so inaccessible that they were not discovered until the 19th century. One of the greatest achievements of Egyptian engineering was understanding load distribution without advanced mathematics. They learned through centuries of observation how stone behaved, how weight pressed downward, how to redirect force. The pyramid is not just stacked stones. It is a masterpiece of controlled pressure, compression, and architectural foresight. But perhaps the most profound truth is this: the pyramids were not built through brute force. They were built through knowledge. Knowledge of astronomy, geometry, materials, labor organization, hydrology, surveying, and human psychology. Knowledge passed down through generations of architects who refined their craft with each project, from the early mastabas to the step pyramids, to the bent pyramid, and finally to the smooth-sided pyramids of Giza. Each structure was not an isolated miracle. It was part of a long evolution of learning. And in that evolution, the pyramids stand not as mysteries, but as milestones, monuments to what human beings are capable of when vision, skill, and society are aligned toward a single purpose. Today, satellites scan their interiors. Laser mapping reveals hidden corridors. Archaeologists uncover new ports, tools, and worker settlements. Every discovery strips away another layer of myth and brings us closer to understanding the truth. Yet the pyramids remain no less awe-inspiring. In fact, the real story, one of determination, intelligence, creativity, and human collaboration, is far more impressive than any fantasy involving lost technologies or alien architects. The Egyptians built the pyramids not because they were primitive, but because they were extraordinary. And the more we learn, the more extraordinary they become. Their work endures, their knowledge echoes across time. Their achievements remind us that humanity is capable of greatness far beyond what we often imagine. The pyramids are not mysteries waiting to be solved. They are answers left behind by a civilization that understood the world in ways we are still rediscovering. That is how the pyramids were actually built. Not what you learned in school, but far more magnificent. Until next time, keep questioning the impossible, because history is full of answers hiding in plain sight.